Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. So welcome to our Saturday morning session. We will continue on the topic of heritage of ancient India, how developed our education was. It will give you basically an eye-opener to all of us that how advanced the education systems were in India in our ancient times compared to what we have today in the Western world, which has been glorified beyond all proportions. You will realize that the education in ancient India was in fact far, far deeper and profound than what we can experience anywhere today. Now the preliminary education in India actually was at home up to the year of 4-5 years of age, 6 years of age. And then they used to send their children to what we call ashram in the Guru's place. So it is known as Guru Shishya Parampara. Most of the children would go and stay in the ashram itself with the Guru. There was no hostel as such, but people lived like a community in the ashram, and they lived with the teacher, the Guru, and they got education there. Now, why it was necessary? You see, education is not what you are teaching from the books. Education for a young child is the one what he is actually observing in you. If you study your own child's behavior at the age of 3, 4, 5, you will realize that he has a tendency to observe your behavior and repeat that. We are not teaching him any, book or any textbook at that stage, but his maximum learning comes from his observation of his parents, of his relatives, of the people in whose contact the child comes. So that is the most profound way of education for a child. Observation and then imitation. Now in Guru Shishya Parampara, this is in modern language, this is also called intrinsic education. Intrinsic education means the things which you cannot transmit through words. You can transmit only in conduct and behavior. For example, you go to a factory where workers are working. The supervisor who wants to transmit some knowledge, he will go to a particular factory, he will demonstrate how to do it, and then the workers will learn and repeat it. It is not through the instruction and a book or a text or repeating in a classroom. It is not so. It is on the job training. Similarly, Guru Shishya Parampara is based on the job Shiksha, on the job Gyan, that the children are learning from the teacher by observing his behavior, by looking at him, by, imitating his activities, what he's doing. So this is very fundamental, difference between what we call education and Gyan. This topic will come later on, but I'll cover it now. Gyan is the personal experience of things through which you learn things. Like you, for example, you touch fire and you experience that this is hot and it can burn you. So that is Gyan. But somebody else tell you that the fire will burn, that is education, that is knowledge, that is given through the books and others' experience. Now, everything you cannot experience personally in life. So certain things you have to take from others' experience and learn them. But fundamental things you must experience yourself so that you acquire that gyan, which is far more profound and different than the knowledge. Knowledge is basically transmission of others' experience or others' writing or others' thought. It is not your own experience. So your own experience on fundamental things is gyan, and that is what the education system in ancient India actually provided. Now the centers of education at the lower level were gurukuls, where the teacher lived, temples, the teachers lived in temples and they taught their disciples in the temples. The Buddhists use viharas. Viharas are basically the green spaces and very quiet places where you do meditation, where you recite mantras. So that was the Buddhist people used viharas. Akhadas were also used. Akhadas are not necessarily the places where you do wrestling and other physical activities, but these were also used for teaching. But some of the akharas were used for giving physical education to the younger generation. Then Gompaj, that is also associated with Buddhist, system of education, and mutts. So Gurukuls, temples, vihars, akharas, Gompaj, and mutts, these were the centers where early education was imparted by teacher in person to the students who used to live with the teacher in those days. Now the education, the basically what constituted education at that time was the Vedic knowledge. Dharma means what is right, what is wrong, what should be done, what should not be done, what is ethical, what is moral, what is immoral, what is unethical, what is socially acceptable, what is not acceptable. So all this education used to come in dharma. The Vedic knowledge was basically to understand the knowledge given in the Vedas, and some of them used to memorize it, and that is why the what we call Chaturvedi, Trivedi, Dvivedi. These words start coming from here. Those who were able to memorize all the four Vedas, they were called Chaturvedis. Those who could memorize three, they were called Trivedis. Those who could memorize two, they were called Dvivedis. So this is how that concept of Vedis came into actually in our social area. So Vedic knowledge, dharma, then agamic. Agamic is basically the temple construction, the performance of puja and other rituals in the temple. That is agamic education which was given. The temples are not for rituals alone, because the location of the temple and its entire architecture was designed in such a way that it becomes a center of energy concentration. There's a lot of concentration of energy, and once you go and sit there, you automatically imbibe a lot of energy from that surrounding and from that atmosphere. So that was the agamic education which was imparted to the students. Then martial education is that akharas which we talked about, where primarily the martial education, they used to teach how to use, how firstly how to strengthen your body. Secondly, how to use bows and arrows. Like for example, Arjuna took martial education in a big way. All other sisters, all other brothers of Arjuna also did the same. So this education can be given in akharas, and also is possible in gurukuls with proper arrangements. Then the music and dance. Now music and dance were in the ancient time. Actually, this was a form of prayer to the Almighty. All the musical ragas of ancient India and all the classical forms of dances, they are, if you observe, dedicated to the Almighty. They are not meant for entertainment as we see it today. Only folk dances were meant for entertainment. Otherwise, all the classical forms of art were primarily, fundamentally dedicated to the Almighty. It is the person who is performing that art, he is in total bhakti, he is in total devotion to the Almighty. whatever shape, name you give to the Almighty, it's immaterial, but it was total surrender to the Almighty, and that was visible in all the art forms. If you look at the paintings of ancient India, for example, South Indian paintings or even the North Indian paintings, all of them are full of images of the Almighty in different forms. Some dedicated to Krishna, some to Rama, some to Shiva. Uh, you will not find any other form of paintings in ancient India. They were completely dedicated to the Almighty. So you are actually thinking about the Almighty in your mind and then reproducing it in the form of paintings. This is what was done. If you go to all the ancient schools of Indian paintings, you will find that totally dedicated to the Almighty. So this was a sort of surrender to Him. Then architecture was also designed the same way because most of the architecture was only for temples. Most other people used to live in a very simple hut, which is made of mud, and they did not really have big, palaces except for the king. The kings used to have palaces, and then the Almighty used to have temples. All other people had a very simple lifestyle, and that is why we protected the nature as well. It was absolutely in harmony with the nature. So the architecture was based on in such a way that it remains warm in the cold weather and it remains coolish in the warm weather. And there was no need of any air conditioning or fans and all other things. This all the natural, you know, products were used to construct those small houses or huts, and they were maintained in a very natural lifestyle. So this is the education which was imparted in various gurukuls at that time. Now we should understand a few words here. Now Shruti Sampradaya. This question was raised: what is Shruti and what is Smriti? Now those people who memorized Vedic knowledge, basically Vedas and Upanishads, and these are part of the Shrutis. If you memorize them, if you completely devote yourself only to those things, they were called Shruti Sampradayas. Uh, Fundamentally, Vedas and all the parts of the Vedas. There are Vedas have Brahmanas, they have Aranyakas, and they have Upanishads. All the parts of Vedas were called Shruti, and that was considered as the voice heard from the Almighty Himself or herself. The Almighty gave those words, and those were jotted down, and that is how it is called Shruti. It was heard. It was heard from the divine power, and then it was recorded. And then people memorize it, so it was called Shruti Sampradaya. Then there was Shaktipat Sampradaya. Shaktipat is basically inflow or injection of energy into the body through which they used to ignite your Kundalini. The Kundalini used to be ignited by injecting energy into the body, and that was done by very specialized trained teachers, trained gurus who did that. So that particular sampradaya was called Shaktipat Sampradaya. Then Prajapati Sampradaya is basically the one which is actually dedicated in Bhakti Yoga, complete surrender to the Prajapati, to the Almighty. That they do not consider their own existence. They feel whatever happens happens because of the Almighty, because of the Samasti. As we were talking just now, that whatever we do, the time has its own toll, it takes its own course, and we all have to follow that course. We have to follow the Jagat, and that's why it is called Jagati. And in that flow of Jagat, you surrender completely. You become non-entity. You are not the doer. And that is those people who did that, they were called Prajapati Sampradaya. Then Buddhism Sampradaya were those who followed the principles of Buddha. the eightfold path which was pronounced by Buddha, which we discussed in one of our talks. That path, those who followed, they were called Buddhism Sampradaya. Now, we already discussed the knowledge and Gyan. Gyan is the one which you experience personally in your own individual way. That is Gyan. Knowledge is one which is imparted to you through others, through the books, through text. Others narrate their experience. They tell you the stories of what they experience. Those that is knowledge. Knowledge is basically coming through language, through outside. Gyan is not through language, it is through personal physical experience. And that is why Gyan is, there are three words, Gyan, Gyata, and Ge. Ge is the one which is imbibed, which is experienced. And Gyata is the one who is doing it. And Gyan is the process of doing it. So once you have done, the Ge becomes your part of Gyata, then that is Gyan. The Ge becomes part of Gyata, so that becomes Gyan. So Gyan is the most profound personal experience. For example, if you do meditation and you experience certain abnormal things during that course, that is Gyan. Or when you experience very peace, tremendous peace, quiet, calmness during meditation, that is Gyan. That cannot be imparted through education. For example, a person can give you a lot of literature on swimming. He can give you 10 books on swimming. By reading those books, you cannot become a swimmer. Nobody can become that. You actually have to plunge yourself into the water and then swim. Then you will become swimmer. So Gyan is like swimming yourself. Knowledge is like books on swimming, how to swim. Now, that is the difference between Gyan and knowledge. Now, these three words, Shiksha, Diksha, and Guru Dakshina, are also important. Diksha is the process in which the teacher actually accepts you as a student, and then he does a particular ceremony in which that acceptance is formalized. Like somebody becomes sannyasi, then he is also given diksha by his guru. So the diksha is the process that you take sankalp, you take a resolution that now onwards you will do this, or he will be your teacher, or she will be your teacher. So diksha is the what you call precondition or a resolution which is formally done to imbibe you the values that now onwards you will take shiksha from so and so guru. And whatever the guru tells you, you will follow that. And shiksha is that gyan which is imparted by the guru, that knowledge, that is shiksha. And Guru Dakshina, you all know that this was a tradition on completion of the teachings. The student used to offer to his guru something in return that is called Guru Dakshina. In case of Eklavya, Guru Dhoranacharya asked him to give his right hand thumb, and he did that. So that is the part of Guru Dakshina. Now, in these Gurukuls, all the students, whether they come from the lowest strata of the society or whether they are from the princely houses, they all lived equally together. Because in that age of 6, 8, 10 years, you do not feel the difference. You 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 are not mentally discriminating one against another based on the wealth and power and prestige. So you have that feeling of equality which is imbibed in your childhood in the gurukuls. All the students live together, they perform hard work, and they do all the work in the gurukuls. They cut woods, they cook things, and they, you know, produce agricultural things. All those things were done through hard work in those 15, 20 years with the guru. And then they used to learn how to respect elders, because they used to respect their teachers and all the elders who would visit. So these three values, equality, hard work, and respect, were actually imparted through gurukuls in every student who is coming there. So those becomes his lifelong education in certain ways. All this is missing today, unfortunately. And the children today don't consider equal, some come in cars and some comes walking through the street, and some are wearing, torn clothes, and some are wearing some fancy clothes. So all that creates discrimination. Students are not allowed to work. In fact, I remember one incident when I went to a school and I asked them, your school is a little bit dirty and surroundings are dirty. Can we put all the students and ourselves to work and clean this process? The principal was scared. She said that somebody will take this photograph and send it to the press, and they will tell me that the principal is making the students clean the school. And that was, I was shocked, because that is part of the education, cleaning your own institution where you are living, the surroundings, each part of the fundamental part of education, and that should be taught to all the students. That's how I feel. And respect to elders is missing completely today, because the teachers are also not behaving in a manner in which they should be respected. So all these values and the gyan are missing. We are only in what we call knowledge these days. We are not in the process of acquiring gyan. Now, this is the what we call Guru Shishya Parampara at the lower level of education. But if you go into the higher level of education, India was the most uh, developed, educational center in the entire world. The first university which is known to mankind today was in Takshila. Takshila is close to Peshawar, it's close to, sorry, Rawalpindi today in Pakistan. This is supposed to be 7th century BC. This particular, university which was set up. It is believed that this was set up by the successor of Kuru dynasty, that is Duryodhan. Some writings say that it was set up by Duryodhan. Some say it was set up after Duryodhan, but by the Kuru dynasty, and that is was one of the greatest institutions India offered that time. Scholars like Panini, Chanakya, Chandragupta Maurya, and Charak, they studied in Takshila. In fact, Chanakya was also teaching at Takshila at one stage. Chanakya was the guru of Chandragupta Maurya, as you know, and he was also a great practitioner of real politics, and he was imparting education to Chandragupta on real politics as well as on diplomacy. You know, Panini grammar in Sanskrit is one of the greatest, and Charaka, who gave some great fundamentals of Ayurveda. So these are some of the great personalities who studied at Takshila, which was the first known educational institution anywhere in the world. And of course, it was in India, Takshila. Then I have a list here of various universities. This is Ratnagiri in Odisha, which was 1st century BC to 11th century AD. For almost uh, more than 1,000 years, Ratnagiri was one of the great institutions in today's Odisha. Then Pushpagiri was also in near Cuttack in today's Odisha. That was another great institution from 3rd century AD to 12th century AD. Then Kathalanur Sala University. This is in Tamil Nadu. It is not very far, I believe, from present day Chennai. So this was from 4th century BC to 12th century AD. Nalanda was in Bihar, you all know. This was primarily a Buddhist, center of education. It was during the kingdom of Magadhs. It was set up. The more precise details are known about Nalanda. It was set up in 427 AD and continued till 1197 AD, when it was destroyed by one of the Islamic invaders who came to India. Then in this Nalanda University has been mentioned by many scholars from China who visited India at that time. Scholars from China, Greece, Turkey, and Persia used to come to Nalanda. And so was the case of Takshila. Takshila used to get scholars from China, from Greece, from Turkey, from Persia in those days. Then Vikramshila was also in Bihar. That was 7th century AD to 12th century AD. This was a great institution again. In Kashmir, actually Kashmir was called Sharda Desh because Sharda Peeth University was such a great university and that the whole area of Kashmir was called Sharda Peeth, Sharda Desh. And this university was in action from 4th century BC to 12th century AD, imparting great education in variety of fields. Vallavi University, this was in Saurashtra area from 6th century AD to 12th century AD. The Odantapuri University, this was in some parts of Bihar from 7th century AD to 12th century AD. And this has been also reflected in some Chinese records stating that there were 12,000 students in this university. Then Kanchipuram is again in Tamil Nadu in South India from 4th century BC to 12th, 13th century AD. So you see these are some of the great universities, Somapura, Jagadalla in Bengal, Somapura University in Bengal. So in every part of India, there were great educational institutions starting from 7th century BC, that is approximately 2800 years from now, till up to 12th century AD or 13th century AD. That was the time when the education, higher education in India was at its peak. The universities were renowned. Scholars from all over the world used to come there. The education was in all the fields, whether it is, what you call political science, whether it was social sciences, whether it was astronomy, astrology, it was concerning mathematics, it was concerning languages, it was concerning physical education, all types of education, art education, religious education, all these educations were taught in these great institutions which produced great scholars. But unfortunately, after the Islamic invasion of India from 11th century onwards, these institutions were destroyed one after another. And this is the map which shows uh, the location of different universities. I have not put all the universities which were there because it is not possible to actually find what we call archaeological proof of those universities which existed. But you can see from the map that all parts of India had great educational institutions during this period. And now the world is telling that the first university was set up in Italy or some places in 16th century, and they completely ignore that in 7th century BC, India had greatest institutions, greatest universities known as Takshila and Nalanda and Vikramshila and other institutions which were present at that time. So this is how the education in India, ancient India, was imparted during that era. That was the region India had great scholars in every single field. They invented a lot of new things. The science was at its pinnacle. In fact, whether it is science of construction, the architecture, whether it is metallurgy, whether it is the astronomical sciences, which I will come to some of them later on in my next presentations, how developed the sciences were in those times in India. And when we will look at the, you know, what you call teachings of Aryabhatta and Bhaskara and others, it will give a glimpse of how advanced India was during that period. Now it is easy to discard it as a primitive education, primitive knowledge, but that education which was imparted in those days, and the scholars who have recorded that, is even more profound and deeper than what we can see today anywhere in the world. And this glimpse I will give you personally when we have more presentations. So this is what I wanted to tell you, that education in ancient India was at its peak, and that is why India was the greatest economy, controlling the approximately 25 to 35% of global trade in those days. That was the size. India was the largest economy in the world, controlling that kind of trade. All the trade routes were passing through India. All the art forms, whether they are paintings, whether they are sculpture, whether they are architecture of temples, it was shipbuilding, or all that was in greatly advanced in those days in India. So I think under evaluating our own history is a big mistake. We have a great past. Unfortunately, we have forgotten that past because of 700-800 years of foreign rules in India, directly or indirectly, and that has created a tremendous gap in our knowledge. Our children today do not know any of these things because they are not forming part of our educational curricula. I have been interviewing many students in the recent months, weeks, and I found most of them do not know much about all this past. This is very sad. Now, these are the ruins of some of the universities. Uh, uh, you can even today go and see these ruins. This is like Ratnagiri, Vikramshila, Jagadala, Pushpagiri, Ontapuri, Somapura, Vallavi, Takshila, Nalanda, Vikrampur. All these are in the forms of ruins which were destroyed. These universities were burnt by Bakhtiyar Khilji. A large number of them were burnt by Bakhtiyar Khilji, who came to invade India in, I think, 12th century. And it is believed that the fire in Takshila and in universities like Nalanda continued for months together. The libraries of these universities were so rich, they were filled with manuscripts of great value, and this barbaric invader came and destroyed all of them physically, burnt the what you call libraries, and he killed a large number of professors. They were very scholarly professors who were teaching at those universities. I believe he killed a large number of them. Not only he, but some other successive invaders came because they did not want India to have this kind of educational systems. And then, after that, the British came, and they also thought that India was still, despite all that destruction, India was still a very great nation. And then they thought the best way to colonize India was to impose their own system of education and belittle the educational heritage of the country. And they imposed their own system, and then they started telling Indians that your civilization is primitive, you are absolutely backward, you don't know how to conduct, how to behave, and please follow us, please listen to us. We are the superior civilizational legacy, and therefore we became like, slaves and followers of those Western people, not only the British, but others as well, whether they were coming from France or from other parts of Europe and now America. So this blind following of the West started after what we call the inferiority complex, which developed in these 6, 7 centuries in India during the foreign invasions and foreign rules. And during that period, our great educational system was completely damaged. It was practically destroyed. And as a result, today, our students do not know much about these institutions. I would request all of you to make your efforts to bring back this heritage, not only telling our own families, but if we can tell, you know, the population at large, wherever you get a chance to tell, to bring this heritage out and tell students to do some research on these institutions to find out how great the Indian educational system was between 7th century BC and 12th century AD, and they will be astonished. So I think this is the duty of our generation to bring this knowledge back and to let our progeny know that India is a great nation, was a great nation, and has the potential to become great nation again. So with these words, I will stop here. If you have any questions on the education system in India, I would be very happy to respond to that. Thank you so much.